Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Widener Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Looking at a professional website without breaking your budget? Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960, or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Widener Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international award-winning author Mia Mosensia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you'll love Missing by Mia Mosensia, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is an illusion and those you love will be the first go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Mosensia has garnered great reviews and even loved and enjoyed by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassidy, Forbes Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for Goes Missing by Mia Mosensia, available on Amazon. Also, check out the Mike Widener Show at themikewidenershow.com on over 40 podcast platforms, heard in over 110 countries, including Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also, Anchor FM, iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, Audible, Apple Music, and being heard on hamiltonradio.net, Diamonds FM, Oldies Radio, and coming soon to a network near you. Take the Mike Widener Show on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Widener Show on the YouTube channel. Follow the Mike Widener Show on Instagram and Twitter today. And for great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com and check out the Mike Widener Show podcast. T-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, tote bags, hoodies, baseball gear, and more. Amazon.com. Check out the Mike Widener Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com/Mia Mosensia for great books like Missing, Once, and Wrinkles. Also, check out the merchandise section for T-shirts, pop sockets, hoodies, and phone cases and more. Amazon.com/Mia Mosensia. Check it out today. Also support the Mike Widener Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, the MikeWidenerShow.com. You can also buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com at the Mike Widener Show. Make sure you do so today. We're here with a terrific gentleman who has a deep love of history and excelled in every subject and read every book he can get his hands on. We'll talk about that. He plans to inspire everyone to be interested in history and taking up creating fictional accounts of historical events. And one of them is the Battle of 1861. And the new book highlights the events of that year when tensions are high in Virginia. State legislature voted to succeed from the Union. Fort Sumter was attacked. A lot of events happened, and the book is called The Republic of Virginia, Brothers and Battlelines of 1861. Live, ladies and gentlemen, from the Plus Studios from outside Richmond, Virginia, the author of the amazing book, The Republic of Virginia, Brothers and Battlelines of 1861. Ladies and gentlemen, the very multi-talented Charles Bateman. Charles, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Mike, how you doing? Glad to be here, man.
Well, it's great to have you on board as well, too. So you have a deep love of history, and you excelled in every subject and read every book you could get your hands on. We'll talk about that. Your plans are to inspire everyone to be interested in history. You also taken up a great interest in creating fictional accounts of historical events, including the Battle of 1861. We'll talk about your book with those events that happened that year when tensions are high in Virginia and more. We'll talk about the book, The Republic of Virginia, Brothers and Battlelines of 1861. And before getting to all that, Charles, tell us how I first got started.
Well, basically, I first got started with the book, Mark, basically by accident, to be perfectly honest with you. During the pandemic in 2020, I work in education. So in the early spring, we were all sent home. Didn't know when we go back to work and how that was going to work out. So had a lot of time on our hands. So me and a couple of friends of mine online, we engaged in, just some casual wargaming, stuff like that. Some of it's done American Revolution, but the most popular style is the American Civil War style. So as we begin to do that, we begin to, have some fictional narratives, obviously, because when you war game out a scenario, you're not necessarily doing it 100% historically the way it was done. That's the whole element of gaming it. It's a game. It's a matter of chance. So as we begin to do that kind of stuff, because we were doing it virtually, because the pandemic made us do it virtually, obviously I had to write some things down so I could keep track of what was going on with myself and other players and different things like that. So, a few months into it, one of my friends is like, man, this is kind of making kind of an interesting story. And from there, we kind of, had a jump off point. And as they say in, historical fiction or the alternative history genre, the POD, the port of divergence. And we kind of had a jump off point and we went from there. I was able to get in touch with my publisher, Tia Fielding Lowe. She's awesome. If you don't know her, find out who she is. And she was able to help me out with the manuscript and putting some things together and making it happen for us.
Okay, that's rather amazing as well too. I'll talk about your book in just 1 minute. And what was that one precise moment that simply influenced you into becoming an author? You know, besides a pandemic, what was that one precise moment in your life that simply said, "This is what I'm gonna do"?
When I was basically, because I mean, somebody asked me recently, did you think you were going to be an author when you were a kid? Absolutely not. Did you think you were going to be an author when you were in high school or college? Absolutely not. What basically happened was is when I began to see that there was some historical content that really wasn't in the mainstream, and as somebody that works in education, I'm very well aware of what the mainstream stuff is, and then some of the stuff that you have to go dig in and look for yourself. And when I begin to see that some of the things exactly were not out there for you to readily find and you had to go look for them, I said, you know what? I said, let's approach things from this angle and let's take some of these, little known facts and let's kind of develop a fictional story around non-fictional, facts that are not necessarily well known. So it kind of created in me a desire to kind of put some information out there that everybody may not know.
Hmm. And also, too, a bit about the book as well, too, that Virginia state legislature voted not to secede from the Union, but Fort Sumter was fired upon 8 days later. And of course, that also branches well, too. It set up a chain of events that led to President Lincoln call up thousands of volunteers, but directly ask for three militias from Virginia to join the army being raised in Washington. So, I mean, that was an event that just got the chain rolling.
That's correct. That's an event that a lot of people don't know the actual timeline to and don't know exactly how it went down. Originally, Virginia is the only state in the union to actually vote secession twice. They voted it the first time on April 4th, and the vote actually failed. It failed by about a 2-to-1 margin. The events of Fort Sumter and some other events that took place on some political backdoor channels that the book touches on a little bit in the beginning kind of swayed a lot of delegates in Virginia that were considered moderate. Kind of swayed them to kind of move a different direction and see that the same attitude of aggression that is being demonstrated towards other states could easily be demonstrated towards you. And the governor of Virginia, John Letcher, made it very clear in his letter that you soliciting our militia to be utilized as a intercontinental invasion force is not going to happen. And to put it in modern terminology, Letcher basically told him, no, it's not going to happen. And so the minute that he was unwilling to submit Virginia militia units, or what we would consider National Guard basically today, the minute he was unwilling to do that, he by and fault put himself in a position to be an adversary to the federal government.
Mm. That's interesting as well too. What was the reason for Virginia, I'm just trying to think here why not to succeed? What was the reason behind it the first time?
The biggest reason why they voted against secession was part and due to the economic status in the northern part of the South. It was way different than the agricultural economy that you see in the lower South. When I say lower South, South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Virginia was the most industrialized southern state at the time. Richmond possessed the second largest ironworks in the United States at the time. So they were not necessarily as dependent upon agriculture and export tariffs of agriculture and things of that nature. The same thing that made South Carolina nullify early laws for export tariffs when Lincoln was elected, that did not affect Virginia as much. The other thing that really made Virginians, especially their legislators, not necessarily want to move towards secession so swiftly is, let's be honest, Washington, D.C. is only about 100 miles from Richmond. So the minute Virginia were to move towards a secessionary tone, they were becoming, enemy territory the very next day. The other side of the Potomac River was hostile territory. So it was much more of a front yard or living room war for them. And as we know, historically, that's what it became.
Hmm. And also too, when Fort Sumter got attacked, was a considered revenge against Virginia for not succeeding?
Fort Sumter being attacked, Fort Sumter was in South Carolina, and Fort Sumter being fired upon by Confederate forces was a move that was made because the governor of South Carolina had asked that the federal troops evacuate the harbor and leave Fort Sumter. All military installations in the southern states at that time had been evacuated, with the exception of that one. And what kind of evolved Virginia from that standpoint is the governor sent a delegation to DC a few days before Fort Sumter was fired upon. And he asked what the intentions were. And the delegation from Virginia was basically led to believe that President Lincoln's intentions was to evacuate the fort. When in reality, he had already sent ships to the Charleston harbor to reinforce the fort and reinforce the garrison. So while he was saying one thing, his cabinet and him were kind of doing another. And the governor was very clear in South Carolina that if you try to reinforce the garrison, if you try to supply the garrison, we're going to fire upon you. And that's exactly what happened. So to put it in modern day terminology, Lincoln basically baited Confederate forces in South Carolina to quote unquote fire the first shot. But the first act of war was actually made by him when he began to supply a garrison with a ship that was no longer technically a part of the United States. South Carolina had seceded at that point.
That's rather interesting as well, too. And we'll talk more about the book in just 1 minute. But first, listen to the Mike Widener Show at the MikeWidenerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Looking at a professional website without breaking your budget? Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@SonicWebStudios.com. Mention the Mike Widener Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Widener Show, international war ring author Mia Mosensia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you'll love Missing by Mia Mosensia, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those you love will be the first go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Mosensia has garnered great reviews and even loved and enjoyed by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassidy, Forbes Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for Goes Missing by Mia Mosensia. Available on Amazon. Also, check out the Mike Widener Show at the MikeWidenerShow.com on over 40 podcast platforms and heard in over 110 countries. Take us with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Widener Show on the YouTube channel. Follow the Mike Widener Show on Instagram and Twitter today. And for great gift ideas 24/7, go to Amazon.com and check out the Mike Widener Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com/Mia Mosensia for great books, merchandise, and more. Also support the Mike Widener Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, the MikeWidenerShow.com. You can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com at the Mike Widener Show. Make sure you do so today. We're here with a terrific author who has a deep love of history and excelled in every subject and read every book he could get his hands on. The Mike Widener Show. He's also author of the book, The Republic of Virginia, Brothers and Battlelines of 1861. Before we continue about the book, you've read a lot of books. And what first inspired you to read?
What inspired me to read really was just a desire for information. And, growing up in Virginia and growing up in a place that is a hotbed for American history, whether it be American Revolution, whether it be Civil War, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of wonderful historical places in the state of Virginia. I tell anybody, if you have a love for history, this is definitely the place that you want to vacation, take a tour. There's so many different things across the state that you can visit. So that kind of created a desire and love for history me as a kid, because I grew up around it. I grew up, less than 2 hours from Jamestown. I grew up less than an hour and a half from Richmond. I grew up in an area that was loaded with history. So I began to want to read, learn about it, learn all I could, and it became a passion of mine. So that's kind of what inspired me to become a reader. Some kids read comic books, some kids read, different things. I really enjoyed reading about stuff that took place 200 years before I was born. That's basically what it was. So,
and I'm sure Honest Abe and good Honest George are listening right now and smiling here. So
I'm sure they are. And
what was your most favorite event or the most interesting that you ever read about history?
Probably the 2 things that I really enjoyed reading about the most was the Peninsula Campaign in 1862. It took place not far from where I grew up at all, the Virginia Peninsula, just north of Yorktown and things of that nature. And reading about the American Revolution as far as Yorktown, because I grew up not too far from there as well. So those 2 things, those were places that I could go to on a semi-regular basis. Those are areas that I could tour, Fort Monroe, things like that. Those are places I could go to a lot because I grew up very close to it. So reading about those things and just learning everything I can about them was really cool because it was in my backyard. It was right across the street.
That's really interesting. We like to hear more about the Virginia Peninsula and the story behind it.
The Peninsula Campaign that took place in 1862, George McClellan, the Union commander, he had a idea that he could take Richmond by using the James River as his route. And that was easy for him to do at first because the Union Army still controlled Fort Monroe. The Confederate forces controlled the south side of the Chesapeake Bay, but the Union forces controlled Fort Monroe. So he used Fort Monroe, which is in modern day Hampton, Virginia. He used that as his base of supply, and he moved his forces up the Virginia Peninsula. This took him through Newport News, Yorktown, and so on. So as he began to move along the James River up the Virginia Peninsula, he actually got within 10 miles of Richmond. In fact, his advanced forces were so close, many of his troops wrote in their memoirs that they could hear the church bells inside of Richmond on Sunday. When that happened, the first battle that took place was called the Battle of Seven Pines. It took place on May 31st in 1862. It was kind of a stalemate battle. Neither side really give ground. But the unique thing that happened is Confederate Commander Joe Johnston was wounded. And when he was wounded, somebody had to take command. And the individual that took command historically, as we all know, was Robert E. Lee. And when General Lee took command, he reorganized the army. And within 30 days, June 25th, he launched a series of attacks on the Virginia Peninsula against McClellan's forces. And within 6 days, he drove them from the gates of Richmond all the way back to the James River. And that was the first major battle that really showed the carnage, so to speak, of what the Civil War was going to be. There were a few battles before that, First Bull Run, obviously, in 1861, but that campaign in those 7 days, many people call it the 7 days battles because it was a battle each day of the week. And those battles that took place really showed, how serious the situation was and what the Civil War was going to be like. And it was really Lee's coming out party as far as being the commander in chief of the Confederate Army in the Eastern Theater and showing that, yes, this war is winnable. And we have a commander in place that, is very good. And, we can get behind him. We can follow him. Now, obviously, we know what history says happened. But in that moment, in the summer of 1862, the Peninsula Campaign was really a body blow to the federal government and the Union Army and drove an army of over 100,000 men to the banks of the James River.
Wow. That is amazing. And I have to say this, I'd love to be your history teacher. And speaking of, being a teacher and all that, how'd you first become a teacher? Well, I'd like to hear your background. It's really interesting.
What got me into education actually has nothing to do with books or nothing to do with any of that. What got me into education is I was an athlete, played sports. Football was my main sport. And when I graduated and was finished with, college and so on, I had an opportunity to actually coach varsity athletics.
Nice.
A friend of mine was going to give me a job and, we knew each other and he wanted me as an assistant coach and give me a job. Well, my whole thing was, I had to have a job in the building too, because coaching sports don't pay the bills. So my first job ever was actually ISS coordinator. That was, in school suspension. I was the detention guy. That was my first job in Newport News Public Schools. And that was in 2011, and I've been going ever since. So what got me into it actually had nothing to do with academics. It had to do with just my love for sports and, working with young men and helping them get the same, things out of sports that I got, which was an opportunity to get an education, an opportunity to have a solid career. So that's what got me into it. But my love of history is kind of what channeled what area of education I wanted to work.
That's
that makes any sense.
That's really interesting. Who are some of your favorite historians growing up? And also, who are some of your favorite authors and also your favorite books growing up?
Probably my two favorite books growing up and my favorite author when it comes to American history was Michael Shara. Michael Shara did he did three amazing books. Two of them were turned into books. One of which, the first one was called Killer Angels. It was turned into the motion picture Gettysburg in 1993. He also did one called The Last Full Measure, and he did one called Gods and Generals, which was turned into a motion picture in 2000.
Oh, I remember that. That was a classic. That was Mel Gibson, wasn't it? Gods and Generals?
Mel Gibson was actually The Patriot, which came out.
Oh, that was it. I was trying to think Gods and Generals. Who was in that one? I can't remember.
Gods and Generals was Robert Duvall, Jeff Daniels, and Stephen Lang.
That was it. Okay.
Yep. Robert Duvall actually played Robert E. Lee, which was interesting because Robert Duvall is actually related through his mom's side of the family to Robert E. Lee.
Wow.
So that's one of the reasons why he was interested in the part. In the movie Gettysburg, as we know, Martin Sheen actually played Robert E. Lee. But in Gods and Generals, Robert Duvall played that part.
That's very interesting too. And of course, getting back to the book, The Republic of Virginia, Brothers in Battlelines of 1861. And of course, some negotiation involved as well too, where the Confederate Congress traveled to Richmond to negotiate the role Virginia will play. And I guess will they join? Will they not join? Declare, just like Texas and everything. And of course, the battle lines are being drawn. It seems like families are being torn apart and everything being negotiated. And yes, it's almost like it's coming down to the wire.
Absolutely. One of the things that took place historically, because remember, the first half of the book is 100% nonfiction. The first couple of sections of the book kind of takes you on a historical journey that's 100% nonfiction. The Confederate government sent a delegation to Virginia in late April to kind of see, what was going to happen. They had sent one prior in February to kind of encourage secession, but it didn't really have the effect that they wanted because remember I said the first vote failed. Well, later in April, they actually sent another. And what they were trying to do is they were basically negotiating if they were going to be absorbed into the Confederacy. Because at that time, legally, seceding from the United States did not automatically make you a Confederate state. Confederate Congress had to basically give you an opportunity to vote on that as well. And one unique fact about the state of Virginia that a lot of people do not realize is the state legislators in Virginia never voted to become a Confederate state. All they voted on was secession. When they voted the vote of secession on April 17th, a month later, on May 23rd, the Confederate government saw that the referendum had been approved for secession. What they had done is weeks prior, they had agreed to absorb Virginia as a Confederate state, but Virginia never actually voted to be a Confederate state. The only thing they voted on was secession, and secession was based upon a citizen referendum that had to be approved within 30 days of the legislators' vote. Well, what we all know, according to history, is when they went and sent that delegation to Virginia, the number one thing that delegation discussed was moving the capital from Montgomery to Richmond. That was the number one thing historically that was discussed. Jefferson Davis wanted to move the capital to Richmond because he realized if I can move the capital to Richmond, I am firmly investing Virginia into my cause, and I'm firmly investing Virginia economically, politically, geography-wise. All of it is invested. It is the same concept that the Continental Congress used when they made George Washington the commander-in-chief in 1776. They intentionally chose a Virginian to lead an army of majority New Englanders because they wanted to pull the Southern colonies into their cause. It's a very similar concept. So when this takes place, what you get is you basically get a bartering chip saying, well, if you join, we'll make your capital our capital. That's basically what happened.
That's rather interesting. And George Washington, being a Virginian, just trying to almost like a 13 colony concept. And how is that colonization differ from the New England colonies? This is rather interesting. I think you brought up.
The concept back then was actually similar to what you saw in the American Civil War. It was two different types of colonies. It was two different types of class and economic groups. In the New England areas, you had more of a shipping, seafaring. It wasn't as much agricultural. It was much different. In the Southern colonies, obviously, it was 100% agricultural almost, with the exception of harbors such as Charleston and Wilmington. For the most part, the Southern colonies were way more agricultural. So what happened in the American Revolution is they wanted George Washington to be their commander-in-chief to pull Virginia and the other Southern colonies into the war effort. In the Civil War, similar actions took place. The Confederate Congress offered and said, we want to put the capital in Richmond because they were trying to get Virginia to fully invest behind what was taking place. So to the point of what the book talks about in the introduction about, the tensions are high and what's going to happen, the book proposes the question, what if Virginia had not done it? What if Virginia had said, we're going to declare a republic the same way Texas did in 1836, and we might be a military ally, but we're not necessarily going to join the Confederacy outright politically and merge our governments and things of that nature. That's what the question proposes. What if Virginia would have stood on her own and stayed on her own? Because the only state at that time in the South that had the industry and the population to do so was Virginia, which is why she was so valuable to Jefferson Davis.
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned about the Republic of Texas, trying to be like the Republic of Virginia. How would the Republic of Texas differ from Virginia? And if Virginia become a republic, do you think they would have had the same success like the Republic of Texas?
Texas was able to last as a republic for about 10 years. And what got them fully absorbed into the United States was the Mexican War. That's basically what allowed them to 100% absorb into the United States. Virginia would have had the same success on a, in my opinion, larger scale. The reason for that is because Virginia was much more populated and industrialized in 1861 than Texas was in 1836. As I mentioned before, Richmond was home to the Trickadorn Iron Works, which was the second largest iron industry in the United States. You have a large naval base down in Norfolk and a large shipyard down in Norfolk. You have the salt mines in the southwestern part of the state, not far from modern day Bristol, that actually produced as much saltpeter for gunpowder as the entire rest of the South combined. So Virginia had the ability strategically from a supply and economic and industry standpoint to stand on her own. Not to mention from a manpower standpoint, Virginia sent more troops to the Confederate Army than any other soldier in the southern states. They sent 155,000 men enlisted either in the Confederate Army or the Confederate Navy during the course of the Civil War. So when you consider that number of manpower and industry behind it, Virginia was well in the position to stand on her own if she'd have tried.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you also had the split too that, they had to cut in half too after the Civil War. You got Virginia and West Virginia. Now, if the split were to happen, do you think Virginia still would have been strong today if it wasn't split?
Virginia, most likely the split would have never taken place. And the reason for that is the reason the split was allowed to take place is because forces were diverted in different places, dealing with more of a Confederate strategy instead of an internal state or Commonwealth of Virginia strategy. If you're in a situation where Governor Letcher is basically acting as president now, the same way Sam Houston did for Texas years before, and men like Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson and those guys, they're only operating in the interests of the Commonwealth of Virginia, then you're able to have a much more heavier military force in the Shenandoah Valley. You have a much heavier military force in the northwestern parts of the state. And the thought of a government seceding from the state government and trying to form their own state is much more difficult to do. Not to mention, part of what made that delegation do that is because they did not want to join the Confederate States. So if Virginia is choosing to stand on her own and not merge into the Confederate States, many of those delegates are not aggressive as they were as far as forming West Virginia.
That's rather interesting too. And assuming that Virginia became Union, like they joined the North or something like that, do you think it would have a much different outcome?
Oh, if Virginia would have joined the North, the Civil War would have ended in less than 2 years. If Virginia would have joined the North, the Civil War wouldn't have lasted past probably 1862, simply because the Confederacy would not have had the ability to stand against not only that much of a manpower shift, but let's be clear, some of the best military leaders of that war historically were from the state of Virginia and served in the Confederate Army. So if you lose the men like Robert E. Lee, if you lose the men like Jeb Stuart or Stonewall Jackson, if you lose those men that served in military roles and now they're fighting against you, your chances for success drastically decrease.
That is rather interesting. And of course, we can find more about the book, Republic of Virginia, Brothers and Battlelines of 1861. Where can we find the book at, Charles?
You can find the book right now, obviously at tfieldinglowmedia.com, but the main place you can find the book is on Amazon.
Okay. All right. And we'll talk more about what's coming up for author Charles Bateman of the Republic of Virginia and more. You listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Also brought to you by our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Mostly Missing, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. We'll be back with author Charles Bateman of the Republic of Virginia, Brothers and Battlelines of 1861 after this timeout. We're back with our author, Charles Bateman of the Republic of Virginia, Brothers and Battlelines of 1861 on the Mike Wagner Show. Charles, a really interesting take on the Battle of 1861, Civil War, and all the great stories and everything, and love to have you back. And what else can we expect from you in 2022 and beyond?
Well, in 2022, we're right now working on the beginning stages of the second book. The book is actually written and designed in a series form. We're not sure if it's going to be 2 or 3. We're kind of looking at that, but I'll let everybody know, if you buy the book, be prepared to be cliffhung at the end. It's not gonna finalize at the end. The other thing I tell people is, be prepared for, some of the people that historically that died, they might not die. some of the folks historically that that live, they might not live. This is historical fiction. This is alternative history. The best way I can describe it is the Civil War kind of meets a Red Dawn type thing. It's historical places, it's historical themes, it's historical people, and it's got a lot of facts in it. But the overall story is 100% fiction. So you have to be prepared for some twists and turns that you may not expect to come because you think you know how the story ends. But the reality is part of this is for entertainment purposes and for interest. It's not necessarily designed to be a study guide for a U.S. history class.
Well, that's a given. We'll let the schools know about that. So we'll hear with author Charles Bateman of the Republic of Virginia, Brothers and Battlelines of 1861 on the Mike Wagner Show. Just a few more, more here. We'd love to have you back. And who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
My biggest influence in my career as an author, assuming that's what you meant, my biggest influence in my career as an author, is probably my publisher, Thea Fielding Lowe, because there were multiple times during this time period that it was frustrating. You wanted to bang your head against the wall, and me being a first-time author and never done this before, I know the story that I want to write. I got it in my head. I write it down and so on. And then I got to come back and I got to add some content, or I got to change some stuff, or I got to do this and I got to do that. And, her constantly saying, it's good. It's just, we can make it better. It's good. We can make it better. And, keep pushing me and so on. And, honestly, this would not have been possible if it wasn't for her. So I got to say, when it comes to influencing me most as an author, that's definitely 100%. That's Thea Fielding Lowe.
That is fantastic. Very amazing influence. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
The best advice I can give to anybody, Mike, especially a first-time author, is patience. The process takes a lot longer than what some folks may realize. And you may write the manuscript in 6 months, but you're probably looking at 6 months to a year before it can be completed, published, advertised, released, et cetera, et cetera. So especially the larger the project. Republic of Virginia is about 240 pages long. It's not a little thin paperback that you're gonna buy in a dime store, novel store. So it's one of those things where the bigger the project is, the longer it's going to take, and you have to exercise patience and you have to pace yourself. If you have a story and you put it on paper and you want to write it, be prepared for it to take at least 6 to 8 months for somebody can see it. It's a process. It's not something that happens overnight. So the biggest thing I can tell a first-time author is just exercise patience and pace yourself.
And that's very good advice indeed out there. Once again, author Charles Bateman of the Republic of Virginia, Brothers and Battlelines of 1861, the Mike Wagner Show. Charles, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Learned a lot from you. Looking forward to having you again soon. Make sure you keep us up to date.
Awesome.
Keep in touch. Love to have you back. And once again, tell us about your upcoming projects. What's your website? How do people contact you? Where can people purchase or check out your book?
Once again, you can purchase it at tfieldinglowmedia.com. The number one place to purchase it right now, where we're getting the most activity, is on Amazon. Amazon is very versatile right now. We're looking at free shipping, I believe, everywhere inside of the United States. We've also looked into international shipping, and we've been approved for international shipping. We're just waiting to see what company we're going to deal with and picks us up and what countries they offer. As soon as I get that information, it will be posted on our social media site. My social media site is author Charles Bateman. You can go on Facebook. You can go up there. You can find me. You'll see different articles and clips about the book. I even occasionally post little content pieces, kind of like little snippets for you to read, and a chapter preview and things of that nature. So definitely encourage people to get this, because it's one of those kind of things, Mike, that you're going to read it and it's going to make you Google, well, did that really happen? Did that happen? Is that person real?
Well, I'm Googling it right now as we speak.
To do.
We're doing that. So
right. It's designed to make people ask questions, mainly because, for instance, the 3 battles that are actually in this book are all 3 fictional. They're fictional battles at historically real and accurate places, but they're fictional battles. But the people and the characters and the places and so on are all real. And the character development is 100% real. And I tried to make it that way because, I want you to get to know the character, and I want you to say, I wonder if that's true, because if I can get you to Google the character and I can get you to research the character, then you'll fall in love with the character and you'll want to know the story for yourself.
Certainly will do so. It's certainly amazing. Once again, Charles, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to having you again soon. Make sure you keep yourself up to date. Keep in touch. Love to have you back. We wish you all the best, and you've got a great future ahead of you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.